You're lying in bed at midnight, running numbers in your head again. Rent is due Friday. Your car made that sound again, the one you've been pretending not to hear. And somewhere in your brain, a calculator is spinning nonstop, trying to figure out if you can afford both groceries and gas this week without dipping into the credit card you promised yourself you'd stop using. This is how most people live. Not broke exactly, but never quite stable either. Always calculating. Always one bad month away from disaster. Always wondering when the other shoe is going to drop. But something strange happens when you cross a specific threshold. When you save your first $10,000, something shifts in your brain that has almost nothing to do with the money itself. The midnight math stops. The constant low-grade anxiety fades. You start making decisions differently, thinking differently, even showing up at work differently. People who've crossed this line describe it as waking up in a different financial reality, not because 10 grand is life-changing wealth, but because of what happens psychologically when you prove to yourself you can build something real. My name is Tom, and I've spent years studying why some people escape the paycheck-to-paycheck trap while others stay stuck no matter how much they earn. Today, I want to show you exactly what changes when you save your first $10,000, why this specific number matters more than you think, and how understanding this transformation can actually help you get there faster. Because here's what nobody tells you. The money isn't really the prize. The person you become while saving it is. And that person will be making financial decisions for the rest of your life. Let me paint you a picture of life before $10,000. Because I need you to recognize yourself in this before we can talk about the other side. When your savings account is sitting at $800 or $2,000 or even $5,000, your relationship with money operates from a specific place. Psychologists call it scarcity mindset, but that term doesn't capture how it actually feels in your body. What it feels like is constant vigilance. Every financial decision becomes a calculation about what you might need to give up later. You see something you want, and your brain immediately starts running interference. Can I afford this? What if something breaks next week? What if I need this money for something more important? What if this is the decision that tips me into crisis? This vigilance is exhausting in ways that don't show up on a balance sheet. You're spending mental energy all day long, monitoring, calculating, worrying, second-guessing. Studies show that financial stress alone can cost you the equivalent of 13 IQ points in cognitive function. That's not a metaphor. Your brain literally works worse when it's consumed with money worries. And here's the cruel part. That mental energy you're burning on financial anxiety is energy you're not spending on getting ahead. You're too busy treading water to swim anywhere meaningful. Before $10,000, every unexpected expense feels like a personal attack. Your car needs new brakes, and suddenly you're not just annoyed, you're stressed for weeks. A medical bill shows up and you're doing mental gymnastics trying to figure out how to cover it without destroying your progress. Your friend invites you to their wedding across the country, and instead of feeling happy for them, your first thought is how you're going to pay for the flight and the hotel and the gift. The problem isn't that you can't handle these expenses. The problem is that handling them costs you something beyond money. It costs you sleep. It costs you focus. It costs you the ability to think about anything beyond the immediate crisis. I want you to understand something important about this phase, something most financial advice completely ignores. The financial stress you feel when your savings are low isn't a character flaw. It's not weakness or lack of discipline. It's actually your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do. When resources are scarce, your mind goes into protection mode. It becomes hypervigilant about threats. It prioritizes short-term survival over long-term planning. It narrows your focus to immediate needs, because that's what kept our ancestors alive when food was uncertain and danger was everywhere. This response is smart when you're genuinely in danger, but it becomes a trap when you're trying to build wealth, because building wealth requires long-term thinking, and your brain is stuck in survival mode, unable to see past next month's bills. Here's something that might sting a little but needs to be said. When you have less than $10,000 saved, you see yourself as someone who is trying to save money. You're in the process. You're working on it. You're getting better. That identity feels reasonable, even positive. But there's a hidden cost to that identity that nobody talks about. When you see yourself as someone who is trying to save, you also see yourself as someone who hasn't yet succeeded. You're still in the before picture. Every setback reinforces the story that financial stability is something you're pursuing rather than something you have. And that story shapes every single decision you make about money, often in ways you don't even notice. This is why people at this stage often make choices that seem irrational from the outside. They'll splurge on something they can't really afford because they feel like they deserve a break from all the deprivation. They'll skip the retirement contribution because the money feels more urgent right now. They'll put off important purchases because they're protecting their small cushion, and then those delays turn into bigger problems later. Someone might drive on worn tires for months to protect their savings, then end up paying for a much more expensive repair when the tire blows out on the highway. None of this is stupid. All of it makes perfect sense when you understand the psychology of scarcity. But it keeps people trapped in a cycle that feels impossible to escape, where their protective instincts actually work against their long-term interests. The other thing that happens before $10,000 is that you make decisions from a position of weakness. This shows up everywhere, but it's most obvious at work. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, you can't afford to take risks. You can't push back on unreasonable demands because you need this job too much. You can't ask for the raise you deserve because what if they say no? And things get awkward and eventually they decide you're not a team player and then you're out. You can't explore that opportunity at another company because even a 2-week gap between paychecks would be catastrophic. The fear isn't irrational. When you have no cushion, losing your income really is catastrophic. So you play it safe, you stay small, you accept less than you're worth because the alternative feels too dangerous to even contemplate. Now let me show you what happens on the other side. And I want you to pay attention to how different this feels, not just in your bank account, but in your entire experience of being alive. The first thing that changes after you save $10,000 is almost invisible, but it transforms everything else that follows. Your brain reclassifies money from a threat to a tool. This sounds abstract, so let me make it concrete. Before $10,000, when you think about money, your brain activates the same regions associated with fear and danger. The amygdala firing warnings, stress hormones releasing, your body preparing for threat. After $10,000, those same thoughts start activating regions associated with planning and opportunity. You're not just feeling different about money. Your brain is literally processing financial information through a different neural system. The fear circuits quiet down and the planning circuits come online. This shift shows up immediately in how you experience unexpected expenses. Before, a surprise $800 car repair felt like a crisis. It dominated your thoughts. It kept you up at night. It triggered that familiar panic response. After $10,000, that same repair becomes an inconvenience. Your savings account takes a hit, but you know you'll rebuild it. The problem gets solved and life continues. You're not lying awake doing disaster math. You're handling it and moving on. The repair costs the same amount of money either way, but the psychological cost is completely different. You're spending $800, but saving yourself weeks of stress and cognitive function. What's fascinating is how this changes the decisions you make, often in ways that save you money. Consider someone who has $3,000 saved versus someone who has $12,000 saved. Same car makes the same weird noise. The person with $3,000 is likely to ignore it, hoping it goes away, because getting it checked feels like an expense they can't afford right now. The person with $12,000 takes it to the mechanic immediately, catches a small problem before it becomes a catastrophic failure, and ends up spending $200 instead of $2,000. The bigger savings account didn't just provide security. It enabled better decision-making that actually saved money in the long run. Security creates good judgment, and good judgment creates more security. The loop feeds itself once you get it started. After $10,000, something happens to your identity that's hard to explain until you experience it firsthand. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is trying to save and start seeing yourself as someone who is good with money. That shift sounds subtle, almost semantic, but it changes everything about how you operate. When your identity is someone who is good with money, financial decisions become easier because you're just acting in alignment with who you are. You don't need willpower to avoid impulse purchases because impulse purchases aren't what someone like you does. You don't struggle to make the retirement contribution because contributing is just what you do. The behavior flows from the identity rather than fighting against it. This identity shift creates a positive feedback loop that accelerates everything. When you see yourself as someone who is good with money, you make better financial decisions. Better decisions lead to better results. Better results reinforce your identity as someone who is good with money. Each cycle strengthens the next. This is the opposite of the scarcity trap you were stuck in before, where financial stress led to worse decisions, which created more financial stress. Same mechanism, completely different direction. Once you cross the threshold and flip the loop, momentum starts working for you instead of against you. One of the most powerful changes that happens after $10,000 is what I call walking away money. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's the financial cushion that lets you walk away from anything that doesn't serve you. A toxic job, a manipulative boss, a bad business deal, a relationship that's draining you financially, a living situation that's making you miserable. When you have $10,000 sitting in your account, you're not negotiating from desperation anymore. You're negotiating from strength. You can afford to say no. You can afford to wait for something better. You can afford to take the risk of standing up for yourself because you know you'll survive even if things go wrong. The impact of walking away money extends far beyond the moments when you actually walk away. Most of the time, you never need to use it, but knowing it's there changes how you show up in every room you enter. Your boss can sense that you're not desperate. Your confidence at work improves because you're not operating from fear. That confidence leads to better performance, which leads to raises and promotions. It shows in how you negotiate, how you carry yourself, how you respond to unreasonable requests. The money didn't just change your bank account. It changed your presence in the world, which changed your outcomes. Security creates confidence, and confidence creates opportunity. Let me show you the math of how this actually plays out, because the psychology is powerful, but the numbers are where it gets undeniably real. Consider someone earning $65,000 a year. They start investing $300 monthly at age 32 into a basic index fund, earning an average 7% annually. By 65, they'll have roughly $400,000. Not bad for $300 a month. But consider someone who starts the same investment at 25 instead of 32. Same $300 monthly, same 7% return, same everything except the starting date. By 65, they'll have roughly $670,000. That's $270,000 more. Not because they saved more per month, not because they found better investments, not because they worked harder, but simply because they started 7 years earlier. The person who saved their first $10,000 faster and started investing sooner gave compound interest more time to work. Time is the multiplier that most people waste. But here's what's even more interesting than the math itself. The person who reaches $10,000 faster is usually the same person who increases their contribution over time. They get raises, and instead of inflating their lifestyle, they inflate their investments. They find ways to earn more and direct the extra income toward wealth building. The discipline that got them to $10,000 becomes the foundation for getting to $100,000, then $500,000, then more. The first milestone isn't just money. It's proof of capability that shapes every financial decision for decades to come. You're not just saving $10,000. You're becoming the kind of person who builds wealth. After $10,000, your relationship with risk transforms completely. Before, every risk felt dangerous because you had no margin for error. A career move that didn't work out could mean disaster. A side business that failed could wipe you out. An investment that dropped could force you to sell at a loss because you needed the cash. So you played it safe, even when playing it safe meant staying stuck in situations that were slowly draining the life out of you. After $10,000, calculated risks become possible. You can take the slightly lower paying job that has better growth potential. You can invest in developing a new skill. You can start the side business you've been thinking about for years. Your safety net isn't huge, but it's enough to catch you if you stumble while reaching for something better. This change in risk tolerance has massive implications for income growth over time. The research on this is clear. People with emergency savings are significantly more likely to take career risks that lead to higher income. They change jobs more strategically, which is consistently the fastest way to increase your salary. They negotiate harder because they can afford to walk away. They invest in education and training because they're not living so close to the edge that any expense feels threatening. They say yes to opportunities that require short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. The safety net doesn't just protect them from disaster. It enables the moves that accelerate their financial progress. Security creates opportunity, and opportunity creates more security. There's another shift that happens after 10,000 that almost nobody talks about because it's invisible from the outside. Your time horizon expands dramatically. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, the future is basically next week, maybe next month if things are going well. Long-term planning feels like a luxury you can't afford because you're too busy handling immediate needs, constantly putting out fires. After 10,000, something opens up in your mind. You start thinking in years instead of weeks. You start seeing how today's decisions connect to outcomes 5 or 10 or 20 years from now. This expanded time horizon is essential for building wealth because wealth is built through compound growth, and compound growth requires time. You can't benefit from long-term strategies if you can't think long-term. Consider how this affects investment decisions practically. Someone with no savings who tries to invest is constantly tempted to pull money out when they need it. They might start investing, then have an emergency, then cash out at a loss, then feel like investing doesn't work for people like them. The experience feels like confirmation that wealth building isn't available to them. Someone with 10,000 saved can invest knowing that money is separate from their emergency fund. They can leave it alone through market downturns because they don't need it for next month's rent. They can actually capture the compound growth that makes investing worthwhile over decades. Same markets, same investment options, completely different ability to use them. Let me make this concrete with a quick example. Consider someone earning $55,000 a year who manages to save $400 monthly. That's aggressive, but doable for someone committed to the goal. At that rate, they reach 10,000 in about 25 months, less than 2.5 years. Now here's what changes in month 26. That same $400 that used to go into savings can start going into investments. If they maintain that habit for 20 years at a 7% average return, they end up with roughly $200,000. Not because they did anything fancy. Not because they found some secret investment strategy. Just because they crossed the threshold that let them start investing with confidence and then stayed consistent for 2 decades. The 10,000 wasn't the destination. It was the launch pad. There's something else that happens after 10,000 that I want you to understand because it affects your daily experience more than almost anything else on this list. The quality of your sleep improves. I'm not being metaphorical here. Financial stress is one of the leading causes of sleep disruption, and sleep disruption affects everything else in your life. Your health, your relationships, your job performance, your decision-making, your mood. When you're lying awake at night, worrying about money, you're not just losing sleep. You're compromising your ability to function well in every area of your life. After 10,000, people consistently report that the midnight math stops. The racing thoughts about bills and emergencies fade. You can actually rest because your brain isn't running emergency simulations all night. That improved sleep quality compounds into better performance in everything else you do. The relationships around you change too, in subtle but meaningful ways. Financial stress is one of the top causes of conflict in romantic relationships. When money is tight, every spending decision becomes a potential argument. Every unexpected expense creates tension. Every difference in priorities feels like a threat. After 10,000, that tension eases. You can have conversations about money without the stakes feeling so impossibly high. You can make decisions together from a place of security rather than scarcity. The safety net doesn't just protect your finances. It protects your relationships from the corrosive effect of constant financial anxiety. I want to address something you might be feeling right now. If you don't have $10,000 saved, this whole conversation might feel discouraging. Like I'm describing a destination you can't reach. But here's what I need you to understand. The transformation I'm describing isn't magic that happens at exactly $10,000. It's a gradual shift that builds as your savings grow. Every milestone along the way carries some of the psychological benefit. Your first $1,000 creates a measurable reduction in financial anxiety. Your first $5,000 creates a meaningful buffer against most common emergencies. $10,000 is where the identity shift typically completes, where you cross from someone who is trying to build financial stability to someone who has financial stability. But you're moving in the right direction with every dollar. The path to $10,000 is simpler than most people make it. Not easy, but simple. You need to spend less than you earn and put the difference somewhere you won't touch it. That's the entire strategy in one sentence. The execution is hard because life constantly presents reasons to spend more and save less. Every day brings new temptations, new emergencies, new justifications for why this month is different. But the strategy itself is straightforward enough that anyone can understand it. What accelerates the journey is automation. When you automate your savings so the money moves before you see it, before it ever hits your checking account, you remove willpower from the equation entirely. You don't have to decide to save each month. You just have to not undo the automation. This works because it aligns with how your brain actually operates. Willpower is finite. It depletes throughout the day. It fails when you're tired or stressed or emotional. Automation doesn't require willpower. It just happens on schedule, regardless of how you're feeling. Build the system once, benefit forever. The other accelerator is increasing income, which feels obvious but gets overlooked in most savings advice that focuses entirely on cutting expenses. There's a limit to how much you can cut. You can only reduce your grocery bill so far. You can only have so few subscriptions. You can only drive so old a car. But there's almost no limit to how much you can earn over the course of your career. People who reach $10,000 fastest usually combine aggressive saving with active work on increasing their income, side projects that generate extra cash, skill development that commands higher pay, strategic job changes that capture market value. The savings rate matters, but the income side of the equation matters just as much. Here's where I want to leave you with something to carry forward. The $10,000 threshold isn't really about the money. It's about crossing from one version of yourself to another. Before $10,000, you're someone reacting to financial circumstances, always on defense, always responding to whatever life throws at you. After $10,000, you're someone shaping financial circumstances, playing offense, making things happen, instead of just handling what happens. Before, money controls you. After, you control money. That shift in agency changes everything about how you experience work, risk, opportunity, and life in general. The question isn't whether you can save $10,000. Almost anyone with a regular income can get there eventually with enough time and consistency. The question is how long you're willing to stay in the before phase. Every month you delay is a month spent making decisions from scarcity instead of abundance. Every month you delay is a month where your brain stays stuck in protection mode instead of growth mode. Every month you delay is compound interest you're leaving on the table for your future self. Time is passing whether you're building wealth or not. The people who build real wealth aren't smarter than everyone else. They're not luckier. They're not working dramatically harder. They simply decided at some point to stop living in the before phase and do whatever it took to cross into the after phase. They recognize that financial security isn't something that happens to you. It's something you build, deliberately, 1 month at a time, one decision at a time, $1 at a time. Your first $10,000 is waiting for you on the other side of decisions you haven't made yet. The question is whether you're going to keep thinking about it or whether you're going to start building it today. Because 10 years from now, you're going to look back at this moment and either thank yourself for starting or wonder why you waited so long. The math doesn't care about your excuses. The calendar doesn't pause while you figure things out. Compound interest doesn't wait for you to feel ready. The only variable you actually control is what you do next. So here's my challenge to you. Don't just watch this video and move on to the next one, promising yourself you'll take action eventually. Take one action today that moves you closer to $10,000. Open the savings account if you don't have one. Set up the automatic transfer. even if it's just $50 to start. Cut the subscription you keep meaning to cancel. Do something, anything, that puts you on the path. Because the transformation I described isn't theoretical. It's not just for other people. It's waiting for you, but it only happens to people who actually start.